It would be a challenge to get everyone out. So turn around to somebody and say, we're glad you're here.
Glad we're here.
And give yourselves a hand for being here. Will you do that right quick? Now let me share this with you. It's not often that I have an opportunity to have my son and my grandson on the front row listening to me because they have to listen all the time. If they doze off, you'll know that they've heard this speech before. So that's all right. But what I would like to do, first of all, is let you know how excited I am to be here and to promise you that I'm not going to talk over 10 or 15 minutes. Is that all right? Now, for those of you who have never heard me speak before, there's something that I learned as a beginning teacher at Luther Judson Price High School in 1966 that has stayed with me all of my life, and I want to share it with you as educators. Say this with me. If I hear, I forget. If I see, I remember. If I do, I understand. Now, I didn't write that. That was written by Confucius over 2,000 years ago. But it's just as true today as it was during that particular time. And that is that most of the things we hear, we tend to forget. But if we see them, we will remember them. And if we do them, we'll understand. And those of you who are educators, remember that it's not enough just to be able to share orally what it is that you're talking about. You have to give them that vision so that they can see it. And guess what? I've been doing this since 1966. You know what they used to call me? The flashcard man. Now they call me the portable PowerPoint man. Because that's all PowerPoint is. You speak and then you let people see whatever it is that you're talking about. So that's what I'm going to do this morning. And I'm going to do it in about 10 or 15 minutes, and I want you to stay with me. Is that all right? Okay, now say this with me. Every day is a good day.
Every day is a good day.
And today is the best day of my life.
Today is the best day of my life.
Turn to somebody and say, there are no bad days.
There are no bad days.
So let's give the day a hand. Go ahead and do that right quick, okay? So if you remember anything else I say to you, remember every day is a good day, and today is a what?
The best day of my life.
Now I'm going to speak to you very quickly on a very important subject. And it's very simple. It's simply, and I have a flashcard for every occasion, and that simply says what?
Effective parenting.
Effective parenting. Now let me share something with you in case you don't already know it. The only difference between an average school and a blue ribbon school or a school of excellence is the extent to which parents are actively involved in the education of their children. You show me an outstanding educational institution, and I'll show you a school where parents are actively involved. So that's what you want to do here at Ivy Preparatory Academy. You want to help parents understand that their role is not just wanted, it's absolutely critical. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we're going to talk about what? Effective parenting. Yes. So the key here is very important. We're going to focus on the importance of what? Parent involvement. And let me let you know some things that you may not be aware of. It's not enough for parents just to be supportive of the schools. They have to be actively involved in the schools. And the family is the most important part of a young person's life, especially as it relates to the developmental years. But let me tell you a trend that I found when I was state PTA president and vice president of the national PTA, is that when I would go to PTA meetings, parent meetings, in the preschools and elementary schools, parents were everywhere. Then you got the middle school and just a handful showed up. By high school, you didn't have anyone but the staff people there. Now, what I want you to understand is, in working with your parents, let them know that they need to be involved from the beginning until the end of their child's education. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we're going to talk about the importance of what? Parent involvement. And I'm going to do something that's very important. First of all, I'm going to give you some what?
Advice.
Say this with me. All people receive advice.
All people receive advice.
But only the wise profit from it.
But only the wise profit from it.
Turn around to somebody and say, we want you to listen up. You're going to get some good advice today.
I want you to listen up. You're going to get some good advice today.
Not only that, but we want to offer you a what?
Challenge.
And the challenge is to pass the word. You only need a handful of people to get anything going. So we have a handful of people here, pass it along, okay? Now, the first thing we want to say, how many parents do we have in here? Raise your hand. Okay, I raised my hand too. So we want to say what?
Thank you, parents.
Thank you, parents. You always want to thank the parents, but you also want to emphasize the fact that you want to thank the what?
Teachers.
Teachers and the administrators. So we want to thank teachers and administrators along with parents because you have to have a partnership. Now let me tell you what I've done. I wrote a poem a number of years ago entitled what?
Together let us dare to care.
And it's a very interesting poem because it focuses on the importance of parents and teachers and school administrators working together. So we're going to do something that you haven't done in a long time. I want you to just stand up right where you are. We all holding hands? Okay. Now, raise your hands up. Keep holding your hands. Hold them up. And repeat this after me. Together let us dare to care.
Together let us dare to care.
For we all have wisdom and knowledge to share.
For we all have wisdom and knowledge to share.
Let educating children be our major concern.
Let educating children be our major concern.
And do all we can to help them learn.
And do all we can to help them learn.
We must have teamwork and cooperation.
We must have teamwork and cooperation.
For together we can save the children of our nation.
For together we can save the children of our nation.
Put your hands down and give yourselves a big hand. That's all right, isn't it? Okay? Now, and what that really means is, whatever we do, we have to understand that we are what?
Better together.
Yeah, we are better together. There's a word for that. We call it synergy. Yeah. And when you work together, it doesn't make any difference how hard you work here at the school. If you don't get parents on board and help them understand their role, you're missing out on an opportunity to take the students to a higher level. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we are what? Better together. And this is the thing that I want you to say to parents. Every chance you get it, it simply says what?
Together we can make a difference for children.
We have to say that to parents because a lot of parents don't understand their role. In fact, some of them tell you, that's why I send them over to you. Don't be calling me with their problem. But you have to do that because that's important. And here's what I tell parents all the time. Say this with me. I will not allow strangers
To
teach my children.
teach my children.
Guess what? We have a lot of parents who don't have a clue about who's working with their children every day. So we need to get parents to make that pledge. Don't let strangers teach your children. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, here we are. 7 steps to being an effective parent and increasing parent involvement. I'm doing very quickly now because I don't have much time left to do it. And for those of you who are not aware of it, the reason I don't talk a long time is my wife said, after about 10 or 15 minutes, my forehead begins to shine. And I said that to some high school students. I said, young people, I'm not going to talk long because my wife said that my forehead would begin to shine. The young man on the front row looked up and said, you can sit down now. Is my forehead already shining? My son's forehead is shining. So just keep that in mind. Okay? So here are the steps. Are you ready for it? The first one is you have to do what?
Start early.
You have to start early, and that's very important. And here we want to say to parents, very quickly, do what?
Get involved.
Not only get involved, we want them to do what?
Stay involved.
So the first one is start early, get involved, and do what? Stay involved. Then you have to remind parents that they have to do what?
Support your children.
Not only support their children, they have to do what?
Raise
I got
praise.
more than one. It says what?
Raise with praise.
And when we say raise with praise, every chance you get, encourage your children and encourage your students. Tell them what they can do and what they won't be able to, instead of what they won't be able to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. And let me give you a true story of this right quick. For years when I worked at the high school level, I was part of the Civil Air Patrol. And we worked with young men who were also active members of the Civil Air Patrol and wanted to go into the military. And we would meet with the young men and talk about what they wanted to be when they grew up. And they would say different things. But anyway, to make a long story short, let me tell you what happened. About maybe 10 years ago, I was on an airplane coming back from Richmond, Virginia. I had just finished talking to the National Mortgage Bankers Association about stress. That was interesting, wasn't it? But anyway, I got on this flight, and before I could sit down, the flight attendant stopped me and said, excuse me, are you Mr. Thomas? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, step back to the cockpit, please. I looked at her, I said, well, did I give you my ticket? She said, yes. I said, well, did I ask to see the cockpit? She said, no. I said, I'll have a seat. She said, follow me. Scare me to death. I reluctantly followed the flight attendant back to the cockpit. She opened the door, and when she did, I looked down, and one of my former students, a young man I had at the Civil Air Patrol at Price High School, was sitting in the pilot seat. You know what he said? He said, Mr. Thomas, I saw you getting on my plane. I looked at him and said, okay. He said, I wanted you to know I'm your pilot. Now let me tell you what's so powerful about this. This is the rest of the story. The young man who is now an airline pilot grew up in Carver Homes. Carver Homes is a public housing community in Atlanta. No father in the home. The family was on welfare. And you know what his friends did when he said that he was going to be an airline pilot? They made fun of him. They laughed. They said, listen, Ozzy, his name was Ozzy Ross. They said, Ozzy, you and your mama together can't even buy a bicycle. How you figure you'll fly a plane one day? But guess what? I said to him, along with Julius Alexander, another person who was working with the young men at the Price, You can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it. So today, Ozzie Ross is an airline pilot. And I was the proudest person on that plane. I walked back to the plane like I owned it. I said, we're in good hands today. You know, I have a real attitude. One of my students is flying this plane. Somebody behind me said, we don't care who's flying the plane. You need to sit down so we can get back to that. But the bottom line is, every chance we get, we have to tell children what they're capable of doing instead of what they can't do. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Turn around to somebody and say, raise with praise.
Raise with praise.
Now, here's my favorite one here. This is very important. You have to remember to say to parents what?
Children up when you're putting them down.
You can't lift children up when you put them down. And that is, you can't motivate children by telling them how sorry they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the other thing you have to do, tell parents that they have to do what?
Spend time with your children.
Spend time with your children. Say this with me, TGIF.
TGIF.
Now, TGIF is something that you want to emphasize with parents. Now, I did this because it's very important. It's going to give you some things that you can share with parents that will help them to really get a feel for what they can do to be more effective parents. Are you ready for it? TGIF says that you should give your children what?
Time, guidance, inspiration, faith.
Now, let me see if you paid attention. What is that?
Time, guidance, inspiration, and faith.
Turn around to somebody and say, those flashcards are working. Give yourself another hand. That's good. The other thing I want to say to you is it's important that you say that your parents do what?
Set positive
Set
examples.
positive examples. Children learn what they live. Children learn more from watching what we do than simply listening to what we say. And if you don't believe it, let your children catch you contradicting yourself. And they'll point it out. How many of you told your children, listen, don't lie to me. You know, if you lie, you'll steal. And if you'll steal, you know, you're just not a good person. Telephone rings, and it's someone you don't want to speak to, and you whisper to your child, tell them I'm not here. What have you just done? You contradicted yourself. So what we have to do is remember to set positive examples for our children, because children learn where they live. Edgar Guest put it this way. He said, I would rather see a sermon than hear one anyway. You remember that point? What he was really saying is you should do what?
Be a walking
Be a
sermon.
walking sermon. Let the children see how important it is for you to be honest. And the last one, of course, no, this is not the last one, next to the last one. Give me a hand for being next to the last one. That's all right. It said you have to do what?
Strengthen the family.
Strengthen the family. A lot of children who are having difficulties adjusting to being in school and in a situation where they have to be disciplined come from what we call dysfunctional families. And a dysfunctional family is not a single family household. It's a family where it's not nurturing. I was raised by my mother. I turned out fine. And look at my children and grandchildren. They're doing fine. You know why? Because even though we were in a single family household, we all always understood the importance of staying in school, staying out of trouble, and always doing our best. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So turn around to somebody and say, we have to strengthen our families.
Strengthen our
And
families.
here's my last one, and this is very important. I want to tell you a story, and then I'm going to step out of this one. A number of years ago, we had a blind man in Atlanta who was busy trying to negotiate his way through downtown streets in Atlanta. And he got to this traffic light, and he was trying to figure out how he was going to get across the intersection without any trouble. And out of nowhere, a lady with a nice, melodious voice came up to the blind man and said, excuse me, sir, may I hold your hand, arm as we go across the intersection here? And the blind man said, thank you, I'll be glad to have you go across with me. To make a long story short, the blind man and the nice little lady very adeptly, very carefully, but very successfully got across that busy intersection. And when he got across, the blind man was getting ready to tell the lady how much he appreciated the fact that she allowed him to hold her arm. But before he could say anything, she said to him, I'm so glad that you let me hold your hand and get across this busy intersection, because it's hard for a blind woman